Access Minnesota, issues that matter to you. Access Minnesota brings you the newsmakers and the stories that shape our everyday lives, with analysis from University of Minnesota faculty experts.
The goal of advertising has always been to influence consumer behavior. But today, marketers know more about our likes and habits and what motivates us to buy. This knowledge, combined with access to personal data compiled from a variety of sources, makes it easier than ever before to target specific individuals. For instance, a recent article in the New York Times revealed that some companies are collecting a surprising amount of data on their customers. Do these data collecting practices put our privacy in danger, or do we as consumers benefit from individualized marketing? This month on Access Minnesota, a look at ethics in advertising with Communication Studies professor Gil Rodman. But first, this political season has seen a sharp rise in so-called attack ads. Critics contend that the Supreme Court's decision in the Citizens United case has unleashed a torrent of negative ads funded by wealthy donors. U of M professor Dan Wackman discusses that court ruling and its impact on the 2012 presidential race. Daniel Wackman is a professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications and an expert on political advertising. Professor Wackman, welcome to Access Minnesota.
Thank you.
Well, we are being inundated, it seems, by political advertising, and it's only going to get worse as the elections in November approach. What differs from normal advertising that we see in political ads that may be not part of the strategy or the physical format of non-political advertising?
Well, a primary difference between product and service advertising and political advertising is the logic of competition is different. In the marketplace, companies primarily talk about their own product. Once in a while they'll do comparative ads, but almost never negative. For example, you will never ever see an ad from an airline when a competitor's plane has crashed saying, "We have not crashed a plane in 20 years." But in the political realm, that happens all the time. And normally, even if there are comparative ads in product and services, they don't want to refer to their opponent, their opposing company, because that brings the opposing company into people's consciousness. In politics, for every claim that's made by a politician against another politician, he's ready and willing, or she's ready and willing to counter that claim. So that's why the First Amendment came into play relative to politics and not to commercial speech. Commercial speech doesn't have full or nearly full First Amendment protection, but political speech does, which is a good thing.
In a 30 or 60-second spot, what can we realistically even learn about a candidate?
One or two things. And so the big question is, what are those one or two things that we're going to have emphasized? And as we know, in campaigns, in the early phases of campaigns, candidates try to introduce themselves to the voter. And so their campaigns will be about themselves and some of the things that they've accomplished and some of the things they stand for. And they have to be careful not to try and put too much information in there. So that, because people just don't remember that and don't have an attention span actually to fully follow 60 seconds.
Polls consistently indicate that the public does not like negative advertising, yet the negative ads are everywhere. Why the disconnect?
Because they work in very specific ways. Newt Gingrich has been bombarded with negative ads, primarily from Mr. Romney, but also to some extent from Ron Paul. And his negatives have gone from not a very good level already, 35 to 40%, up to 60%, almost at all-time highs. And it's this barrage of negativity that drives that figure, which is very important. You can't get people to vote for you if they have a very negative perspective on you. Now, what's interesting, a major result of all of the kind of advertising that seems to have gone on so far, which is a tremendous amount, is that all of the Republican candidates have had their negatives increase substantially. And so that's why the Republicans are so worried right now. They don't have anybody who seems to be capturing even the Republican voters' fancy, and when they take independents and so forth into account, many of them are near 50% negatives. And that's a bad way to start the general election campaign.
Tell us more about the impact of the Citizens United case. What was the case about, and how does it impact the amount of money that can funnel into the political action committees?
Well, it was brought by Citizens United, a Republican group who was basically arguing that the restrictions in McCain-Feingold were a violation of free speech. And the biggest impact of this was not on candidates' ads and the support of candidates' ads. The Supreme Court did not rule it illegal that there's a restriction of you or I could only give $2,500 to a presidential candidate for a primary election and another $2,500 for the general election, so a total of $5,000. And that was okay. And so those limits still prevail for candidate funding. The difference was that overturning kind of a 100-year position of the court, they said that corporations are just like people. And so they can give money just like people can. And the second really important thing is they said, in this day and age, money is equivalent to speech. Because if you can't pay the money to get on television, you can't, you don't have the right to speech. And so in the context of there should be freedom of speech in political areas, that meant you can't limit the amount of money that people can donate to express their views. Now, they only freed that limit up relative to PACs, political action committees. And now they're called super PACs because they're raising so much money and have these kind of new rights that have been given to them.
Well, the negative attacks do seem to work, but does it worry you personally that the more the electorate sees this negativism, we're seeing more and more people saying, you know, I just can't stand the fact that Congress or the legislature can't get along, they can't come to compromise anymore. Is there a danger that this will have a long-term negative impact on liberal democracy?
Absolutely. Now, people say, well, why should there be limits on how much money a person can give? And the whole idea is within the classical liberal model of democracy, no person or small set of people should have too much power. Just shouldn't happen. And so if money is going to be a driving force in politics, which it certainly is today with political ads being a major vehicle for getting out the message in this huge country that we have, then if there are a relatively few number of people who are spending all that money, the idea is that money gives you some access and impact on candidates. And there's certainly a lot of evidence that that can and has been true. So a fact that I just heard the other day NPR, I think it was, in the primaries and caucuses and so forth that led up to the end of January. They counted all the money that was spent by super PACs, because that had to be established, and by campaigns. And of that total amount of money, 5 people donated 25% of that money. 5 people. In the there's every one of the major super PACs for the Republican candidates have at least one person who's given multi-million dollars. And there are some donors, wealthy businessman from Texas who's given $14 million and spread it among PACs supporting 6 different candidates. He's kind of covering his bets, I guess, you know. There's the Koch brothers are pretty famous in this neck of the woods, and for people who come from Wisconsin, where I originally did, because they had a huge impact on the election in Wisconsin that got Scott Walker elected as governor. 2 times a year they hold a super secret meeting of very wealthy Republican conservatives. Just recently they had such a meeting, and reports coming out of that said that they have set a goal of $1.5 billion to spend in ads in the general election to defeat Barack Obama. And at the meeting, they went around the room and said, here's what we expect from you: 10 million, 12 million, 5 million. So they're giving them kind of quotas. And they figured out that that process would yield them, if people came forth with the money, that they would get $500 million. $500 million has got to distort politics, because the campaigns themselves can't raise anywhere near that sort of money, you know. So that's what the real threat is, that they're going to concentrate power in a very small number of individuals who are very like-minded in their desires.
Daniel Wackman, Professor of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Minnesota. Thanks so much for joining us on Access Minnesota.
Thank you for the opportunity.
When Access Minnesota returns, Professor Rodman discusses the technological advances in marketing that utilize more of your personal data than ever before.
Access Minnesota will return after these messages.